Solo Leveling, Chapter 117. When a man climbs so high that even death hesitates to touch him, he begins to wonder if he still belongs among the living. That's where Jinwoo stands now. Not as a hunter, not as a survivor, but as a force the world is no longer equipped to contain. And in Chapter 117, the shadows finally start whispering the truth behind his power. The city of Seoul slept restlessly beneath the pale breath of the moon, a restless beast of lights and glass and human noise, trying its best to pretend the world was still normal. But standing at the very edge of a rooftop, silent, unmoving, was a man who knew better. Jinwoo stared down at it all. The rows of windows blinking with television screens, the blinking dots of red and white that passed for traffic, the people far below who had no idea just how close they all stood to something ancient and unforgiving. There was something inside him tonight. Not fear, not anger, a pressure, a presence, a low thrum in his bones like a drumbeat buried under the skin. The memory of what had stepped out of that last gate wouldn't leave him. Not a monster, not a boss, but a monarch. A being older than the system itself. One that had spoken to him like he was nothing more than a child playing king in a kingdom built from corpses. And worse than that, it had known his name. He left the world behind with a whisper of mana. The shadow gate peeled open before him, like the mouth of some old god, and he stepped through, swallowed not by darkness, but by silence. Here in the shadow realm, where time bent and space collapsed into black mist and flowing shapes, his army was already waiting. They didn't need to be summoned anymore. They felt his unrest. Aru dropped to one knee, wings folded, head bowed in reverence. Egress stood behind him like a silent tower. Iron stood with his hammer planted firmly into the ground, still as a monument. Tusk glowed with runes that pulsed to his heartbeat, and Kaizo, the flying beast, shifted his massive wings in anticipation. But Jinwoo wasn't here to command. He walked slowly between their ranks, not as a general surveying troops, but as a man walking through a dream he hadn't fully accepted was real. These creatures were his now, not by choice, but by right. He had earned them with blood, with death, with sacrifice. And yet, standing in the middle of them all, he felt the creeping cold of one final question. What if this was never a blessing, but a trap? Hours passed in that world, or maybe seconds. It was hard to tell. When he returned to reality, the first place he went wasn't the association, or a gate, or his shadow army. It was the hospital. It was his mother. She was awake again now, eating breakfast, asking how his day had been, like nothing had ever happened. Like she hadn't to spend 3 years locked in a coma while he risked his life over and over again. She smiled at him the way only a mother can. Soft, proud, blind to what he'd become. "You've changed so much, Jinwoo," she said as she poured tea. "You're taller and quieter." He didn't respond, because how could he explain that the boy she remembered, her son, had died once? And what stood in front of her now was something the world didn't even have words for. Back in his apartment, night had fallen deeper. The city was quieter now, but Jinwoo's mind was louder than ever. He turned off the lights, let the shadows grow, and in that dim glow, something shifted. Not in the room, but in him. A tremor in the mana, a strange pulse. Not a message from the system, not a quest window, but a ripple, a presence. His head jerked slightly. His breath caught. And then, a vision. It didn't come as light. It didn't come as voice. It came as memory. A battlefield that existed outside time. Skies lit in burning red, wings of flame clashing against creatures of darkness and teeth and void. Soldiers of light, creatures of chaos. And in the middle of it all, a throne made of shadow and fire, and sitting upon it, him, Jinwoo. But not like this, not in this body. Not in this time. A different version of himself. Older, larger, cloaked in darkness that moved like smoke, with legions beneath him that screamed for war. The voice came then, not from the vision, but from everywhere. Shadow Monarch, you are not chosen. You are remembered. Jinwoo gasped and fell to his knees. Sweat clung to his skin. His heart thundered like a hammer striking stone. He gripped the edge of the table just to stay grounded. The room felt wrong. The shadows felt heavier. What was this? What had he just seen? A memory? A warning? Or the truth of what he really was? The system hadn't made him strong just to survive. It had rebuilt him, repurposed him, resurrected him for a war older than the world itself. The Monarchs weren't the endgame. They were just the next chapter. And now, he understood something terrifying. He wasn't just walking into war. He was the war. Chapter 117 doesn't explode. It unfolds like a prophecy. And Jinwoo? He's not rising anymore. He's awakening. Solo leveling. Chapter 118. There comes a moment when silence becomes the loudest sound in the world. Not the silence of peace, but the stillness that only happens right before the storm breaks. In Chapter 118 of Solo Leveling, Jinwoo isn't fighting monsters. He's walking through the calm that exists when something worse is about to wake up. And this time, he can feel it breathing. Morning light leaked through the edges of heavy curtains, soft and pale, as if the sun itself didn't want to intrude. Jinwoo sat still in his kitchen, one hand wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, the steam long disappeared. His apartment was quiet, too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that brought rest or peace, but a weighted silence that settled into the corners of the room like fog, like something invisible had followed him home from the last gate and now watched him from the shadows. He hadn't spoken to anyone since returning, not to the association, not to his mother, not even to his shadows. The monarch's words from before still lingered in his mind, like ink spreading slowly across paper. You were never meant to awaken. The system was silent. Not dead, just ... watching. And Jinwoo? He was starting to realize that his life as a hunter was only the first chapter of something much, much older. His phone lit up against the dimness. One soft vibration, no ringtone, just enough to break the stillness. He already knew who it was before he picked it up. Hunter Soong Jinwoo, the voice said, calm but sharp. An S-rank gate has opened. We've received reports of an abnormal mana pattern. There was a pause, not from hesitation. The location is remote, but because the caller knew, this wasn't a random request. It was a summon. We'd like you to handle it solo. Too remote, too quiet. And the moment Jinwoo heard the coordinates, he knew it was no coincidence. This gate wasn't a job. It was a message. Asphalt gave way to dirt. Streetlights gave way to trees. The sky above him turned dull and gray, swollen with clouds that felt ready to burst. But he didn't ask questions, didn't negotiate. I'll go, he said simply, and hung up, because deep down he had to see it for himself. The city melted behind him as he rode, building after building slipping away like a dream fading from memory. In the distance, above a jagged ridgeline, the gate appeared. A massive dark oval hanging in the sky, quiet, unmoving, like a mirror left cracked and floating above the earth. It didn't pulse. It didn't flash. It simply was. He stood at its edge for a long moment, letting the mana roll over him like wind, but it wasn't wind. It was something colder, something aware. Stepping through the gate was like walking into a memory. The sky above was neither day nor night, just a flat, colorless void. The world on the other side wasn't wild or chaotic. It was still. Stone ruins stretched endlessly across a bleak gray plain, statues long toppled, towers leaning at impossible angles, as if they'd grown tired of standing over the centuries. No monsters, no movement, no boss, just stillness. His footsteps echoed against stone, and somewhere in the distance he could feel it. Something was watching, not hiding, not moving, just waiting. It started with a change in pressure, the air tightening around him, his breath fogging as the temperature dipped. Not drastically, just enough for him to know he wasn't alone. A single footstep echoed behind him. He didn't turn. He waited, and another footstep followed. This time, he moved, slowly, deliberately, turning to face the presence emerging from the mist. A humanoid figure, tall, draped in charred black armor, laced with pulsing veins of violet light, eyes dim but alive. Not a beast, not a boss monster, but a monarch. The second one to show itself, and somehow even more ancient than the first. The monarch didn't raise a weapon, didn't bare teeth, didn't roar. He simply spoke. You weren't supposed to survive this long. His voice was calm, smooth, measured, like someone stating a fact, not delivering a threat. You were meant to sleep, to fade, not to wake in this world again. But you broke the balance. Jinwoo didn't flinch. He met the monarch's gaze and replied with a voice just as quiet, just as steady. I didn't break anything. I just refused to die. The monarch nodded, not in respect, in recognition. And now the others are stirring, the true monarchs. The war you ran from is returning. And they will not speak to you. They will end you. No fight, no clash of power, no drama. The monarch's form began to dissolve into mist, not fleeing, not wounded, simply disappearing, like a dream pulling back into darkness. But before vanishing, he left one final sentence hanging in the cold dungeon air. You were reborn not by accident, but because this time you must finish what you started. And then the dungeon collapsed, not with chaos, but with a quiet snap. The gate closed. The sky returned, and Jinwoo stood alone again, holding a weight that only he could carry. This wasn't a mission. It wasn't a test. It was the second warning, and possibly the last. The monarchs were real. They knew him. They feared him, and they were coming, not one at a time, all at once. And the gates? They weren't the danger anymore. They were just the doorbells. Chapter 118 ends in silence. But behind that silence, Marsh swore. And Jinwoo? He's no longer just a hunter. He's the storm they were trying to stop.